If you had of, it would have been something very natural, but I would have probably kicked your shins or something.
Dolly Parton has spent over 6 decades in the music business, building a reputation as one of the kindest and most gracious women in entertainment. But even Dolly has her limits, and over the years she's been remarkably honest about the people who crossed her, betrayed her trust, or made her life more difficult than it needed to be. Today we're counting down from 5 to 1, starting with the mildest tension and ending with the most painful betrayal of her entire career. Some of these stories involve public insults, some involve lawsuits worth millions, and one involves a song that could have changed music history if only the deal had been fair. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why Dolly Parton never forgets, even when she forgives. But to understand why these conflicts cut so deep, you first need to understand where Dolly came from. The girl from Locust Ridge, January 19, 1946, a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, no running water, no electricity, and 12 children sharing that tiny space with their parents. That's where Dolly Rebecca Parton came into this world. Her father Lee worked as a farmer and construction laborer, and though he never learned to read or write, Dolly has always called him the smartest man she ever knew. Her mother Avie Lee brought all 12 children into the world before turning 35, and she passed down her love of music, storytelling, and faith to her daughter. Music wasn't entertainment for the Parton family, it was survival. They couldn't afford radios or records, so they made their own music instead, singing hymns in church and harmonizing on the porch after supper. And when little Dolly opened her mouth to sing, everyone in that cabin knew she had something different. Local radio and television shows in Knoxville featured her by the time she turned 10, and her early teens brought an appearance at the Grand Ole Opry. The day after her high school graduation in 1964, she packed everything she owned into a bag and bought a one-way ticket to Nashville, with no money, no connections, and no safety net, just talent and ambition bigger than the Smoky Mountains she left behind. Her first few years in Nashville were spent writing songs for other artists, and she showed real skill at it. But Dolly didn't move to Nashville to write hits for other people. She wanted the spotlight for herself. That first taste of it came in 1967 with a song called Dumb Blonde, a clever little number that let the world know she was a whole lot smarter than she looked. And that same year, everything changed when she joined the Porter Wagoner Show, and suddenly millions of Americans were seeing Dolly Parton on their television screens every single week. Her rise from that point was unstoppable. Two of the most iconic songs in country music history, Jolene and I Will Always Love You, came in 1973. Hollywood films alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin followed in the 1980s, and 1986 brought Dollywood, her own theme park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, built not to show off her wealth, but to bring jobs and tourism to the community that raised her. Today, Dolly Parton's net worth reaches into the hundreds of millions, multiple Grammy Awards sit on her shelves, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame counts her among its members. Her imagination library has given away over 200 million books to children around the world. But here's what most people don't realize. For all her kindness and generosity, Dolly Parton is also one of the toughest and most business-savvy women in the entertainment industry. Someone who built her empire by knowing her worth and refusing to let anyone take what belongs to her. That steel backbone hidden beneath the rhinestones and the smile is exactly what led to some of the most intense conflicts of her career. And that brings us to our countdown. Number 5. Jeff Tweedy. Jeff Tweedy fronts Wilco, one of the most respected bands in alternative and indie rock, and he's known for his thoughtful, introspective songwriting as well as his willingness to speak his mind. At some point, he decided to share his opinion about Dolly Parton's work, and what he said caught people off guard. His criticism targeted her songwriting directly. Tweedy suggested that Dolly's lyrics were superficial, more about catchy hooks than complex, meaningful content. He compared her unfavorably to other songwriters who he felt delivered more depth in their work, and then he went further, saying that Dolly should have stopped writing after Jolene. When asked if he hated Dolly Parton, his response was that no, he loved her. But his criticism rang clear. He didn't think her songwriting measured up to what he considered truly great. For anyone who really knows Dolly's catalog, those comments were hard to understand. Thousands of songs fill her body of work, many of them deeply personal reflections on her life, her struggles, her faith, and her experiences. Coat of Many Colors alone stands as one of the most emotionally powerful songs in country music history. Reports surfaced that Dolly knew what Tweety had said and wasn't happy about it. She has always taken pride in her work as a songwriter, always written from the heart. Hearing another musician reduce her decades of work to something less than meaningful must have stung, but Dolly didn't fire back publicly, didn't engage in a war of words. She simply kept doing what she has always done, writing songs, performing for her fans, and letting her work speak for itself. Tweety's criticism didn't change the fact that her songs have touched hundreds of millions of people around the world, didn't change the fact that the biggest names in every genre have covered her music, didn't change the fact that she is, without question, one of the greatest songwriters America has ever produced. Some critics just don't get it, and that's okay. Dolly Parton's legacy doesn't need their approval. Number 4. Elvis Presley. The mid-1970s found Elvis Presley sitting at the top of the music world. The king of rock and roll had already conquered everything, and he had a reputation for taking other artists' songs and turning them into massive hits. When Elvis recorded a song, it didn't just succeed, it became iconic. So when Dolly learned that Elvis wanted to record her song I Will Always Love You, she was thrilled. She had written it in 1973 as a farewell to Porter Wagoner, and it had already become one of her signature hits. Having Elvis Presley put his stamp on it seemed like the ultimate honor, and then she found out about the deal. Colonel Tom Parker managed Elvis, and he was one of the most notorious figures in the music industry. His standard arrangement was simple. If Elvis recorded your song, Parker took 50% of the publishing rights. No negotiation, no exceptions. Dolly heard the terms and didn't hesitate. She refused. The money was significant, that's true. But this was about principle. I Will Always Love You represented the most valuable copyright in Dolly's entire publishing catalog. Every word of it came from her. She had poured her heart into it, and she was not about to hand over half of it to someone who had nothing to do with its creation. Her words to Parker were direct. This is my most important song and I can't give away half of it. Elvis, by all accounts, took the news hard. He had genuinely loved the song and was eager to record it, but Parker's deal was non-negotiable, and Dolly's refusal was final. The situation created a rift that never fully healed. Dolly has said in interviews that she doesn't think Elvis ever completely forgave her for saying no, that there was a noticeable distance between them that hadn't existed before. But here's what happened nearly 20 years later. Whitney Houston recorded I Will Always Love You for the soundtrack of The Bodyguard, and her version became one of the best-selling singles in music history, spending 14 weeks at #1 and winning Grammy Awards. And because Dolly had refused to give away her publishing rights all those years ago, she earned millions of dollars from Whitney's success. Standing her ground against the king of rock and roll turned out to be one of the smartest business decisions Dolly Parton ever made, even if it cost her a friendship. Number 3. Linda Ronstadt. 3 of the most powerful voices in American music started dreaming of a collaboration back in the 1970s. Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris were all established stars in their own right. They admired each other's work, they harmonized together backstage, and they kept talking about making an album that would bring their voices together on one record. Making that dream a reality turned out to be far more difficult than any of them expected. Record label politics got in the way. Scheduling conflicts pushed back recording sessions year after year, and the 3 women, each with her own career, her own commitments, her own way of doing things, struggled to find common ground. Their album, simply titled Trio, finally arrived in 1987, and when it came out, it delivered everything fans had hoped for, going platinum, topping the country charts, and winning a Grammy Award. The harmonies were breathtaking, the song choices were impeccable, and the 3 voices blended together in a way that felt almost magical. But behind the scenes, the recording sessions had been anything but harmonious. Dolly is known for her efficiency in the studio, often nailing a vocal in just 1 or 2 takes, believing in capturing the emotion of a moment and moving on. Linda Ronstadt had a completely different approach, a perfectionist who could spend hours on a single phrase, adjusting every note until it met her exacting standards. Emmylou Harris found herself caught in the middle, trying to mediate between 2 very different personalities with 2 very different working styles. Dolly later admitted that the sessions were difficult, describing Linda as someone who loved to live in the studio, working slowly and meticulously while Dolly was ready to move on to the next song. She confessed that there were times she wanted to yell at Linda out of sheer frustration, but Dolly kept her composure, finished the album, and when Trio became a massive success, it seemed like all the tension had been worth it. And then they tried to make a second album. Recording for Trio 2 began in 1994, but scheduling conflicts and label disputes caused endless delays. 5 full years passed before the album saw release in 1999, and by that point, the relationships between the three women had been strained to the breaking point. Linda Ronstadt, always outspoken, didn't hold back when discussing the problems they'd faced. In interviews, she criticized Dolly for being unreliable during the recording process, claiming Dolly would cancel plans at the last minute or show up late to sessions. She called her flaky and suggested that Dolly cared more about her solo career than about the group project. Those words stung. Dolly has always prided herself on being professional, and hearing a collaborator question her commitment cut deep. Linda made it clear she had no intention of working with Dolly again, saying that Dolly's behavior had spoiled what should have been a joyful collaboration. Years later, the two women would show signs of moving past their differences, but the warmth they once shared never fully returned. Public appearances brought them side by side, smiling for the cameras, but the tension was still there, just beneath the surface. The Trio albums remain some of the most celebrated recordings in country music history. But for Dolly, they also serve as a reminder that not every collaboration is meant to last forever. Number 2. Howard Stern. For someone who has spent her entire career being gracious and avoiding conflict, it takes something truly extreme to make Dolly Parton fight back. In 2008, she found that breaking point. Howard Stern built his career on being controversial. His radio show famous for pushing boundaries and saying things other hosts wouldn't dare to say. His fans saw him as fearless and entertaining. His critics saw him as crude and often cruel. And in 2008, his team created a segment that crossed a line Dolly never imagined anyone would cross. Using recordings from Dolly's audiobook My Life and Other Unfinished Business, Stern's producers edited together clips of her voice to create a fake interview, splicing words and phrases to make it sound like Dolly was saying vulgar, racist, and deeply offensive things. The fake interview made it seem like she was insulting other artists, including Kenny Rogers and Linda Ronstadt, and making crude remarks about her own body. Stern's show played the segment to laughs and applause. To his team, it was just another shock comedy bit, just another way to get attention. For Dolly, it was character assassination. Her public statement was unlike anything she had ever released before. "I have never been so shocked, hurt, and humiliated in all my life," she wrote. "I cannot believe what Howard Stern has done to me. In a blue million years, I would never have such vulgar things come out of my mouth." And then she did something she almost never does. She threatened legal action. If there was ever going to be a lawsuit, she declared, it's going to be over this. For a woman who had spent decades taking the high road, refusing to engage in public feuds, and forgiving people who had wronged her, this was extraordinary. Howard Stern had pushed Dolly Parton past her limit. Stern, for his part, never apologized. He claimed the segment was satire, and insisted people were being too sensitive, laughing off the backlash and moving on. But Dolly didn't forget. 15 years passed without any interaction between them. She never appeared on his show, never acknowledged him publicly. And then in 2023, something unexpected happened. Dolly was promoting her new rock album, Rockstar, a departure from her country roots. And she was doing press everywhere, including places she might not normally go. For the first time ever, she agreed to appear on The Howard Stern Show. Stern was noticeably different during the interview. Respectful, complimentary about her talent and legacy, almost subdued. But anyone watching could feel the tension in the room. Dolly was there for business, not reconciliation, promoting her album and nothing more. She had proven, once again, that she could face the people who had hurt her without losing her dignity. But that didn't mean she had forgiven what Howard Stern did to her in 2008. Some wounds don't heal all the way. Number 1. Porter Wagoner. Before Dolly Parton became a household name, Porter Wagoner was already a star. He was a country music legend with his own nationally syndicated television program, The Porter Wagoner Show. Charming, talented, and extremely shrewd when it came to business. In 1967, he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever, hiring Dolly Parton as his new female vocalist. The job had previously belonged to a singer named Norma Jean, beloved by fans, and when Dolly showed up to take her place, the audience was not happy about it. People booed Dolly on stage and sent angry letters to the show. But Porter believed in her, and Dolly, ever gracious, ever determined, kept showing up, kept smiling, and kept singing. The audiences came around before long. Her voice was undeniable. Her charisma was magnetic, and when she sang duets with Porter, the chemistry was electric. Together they recorded hit after hit after hit, more than a dozen songs reaching the top 10 on the charts, becoming one of the most successful duos in country music history. On camera, they looked like the perfect partnership. Behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. Porter Wagoner didn't just want to sing with Dolly. He wanted to control her entire career, managing her appearances, deciding which songs they would record, having final say over nearly every business decision involving her name. For a while, Dolly went along with it, grateful for the opportunity he had given her, respecting his experience in the industry. But Dolly Parton was never meant to be someone's sidekick. She was a songwriter with her own vision. She had ideas that went far beyond duet records and television appearances, and the more successful she became, the more she wanted to stand on her own 2 feet. The early 1970s brought tension that was becoming unbearable. Dolly later admitted that Porter had a hard time seeing her as his equal. He had given her a platform, yes, but that platform was starting to feel more like a cage. She had originally agreed to stay with the show for 5 years, but 5 years turned into 6, and 6 turned into 7. Porter kept finding reasons to delay her departure because Dolly Parton had become the biggest draw on his show, and he didn't want to let her go. Finally, in 1974, Dolly made the difficult decision to leave. She did it as gracefully as she could, hoping to preserve their friendship, and she even wrote him a song to explain her feelings. A little number called "I Will Always Love You." To the public, it seemed like an amicable split. And then, 5 years later, Porter Wagoner walked into a courtroom and filed a lawsuit against her for $3 million. He claimed she had broken their contract, that she owed him management fees, a cut of her income, and compensation for expenses related to the show. Dolly was blindsided. She had always seen Porter as a mentor, even if their relationship had become strained, and this lawsuit felt like a betrayal of everything they had built together. The legal battle dragged on with public statements, press coverage, and whispers throughout the industry. But Dolly refused to drag Porter through the mud. Instead of fighting it out in court, she quietly settled the case, paid him what he asked for, and walked away. Years later, she spoke about that period with remarkable honesty. "When I was trying to leave the show, I had told Porter I'd stay 5 years. It had been 5, and it was 6, and it was 7. He was just having a really hard time because it was going to mess up his show. We were very bound and tied together in so many emotional ways, and he just would not hear it." That quote tells you everything. Their conflict wasn't just about money or contracts. It was about control, pride, and 2 people who had been too close for too long. But here's where Dolly Parton proved just how big her heart really is. The late 1980s brought the beginning of their reconciliation. After years of barely speaking, they would never be as close as they once were, but they found a way to make peace with their history. In 2002, Dolly did something that surprised everyone in Nashville. She was chosen to induct Porter Wagoner into the Country Music Hall of Fame, and she stood on that stage and told the audience how much he had meant to her, how he had believed in her when no one else did, how he had given her a chance when she was just a girl from the mountains with nothing but a dream. And when Porter was hospitalized with lung cancer in 2007, Dolly went to visit him, sat by his bedside, and said her goodbyes. He passed away just a few weeks later, and she held a tribute concert for him at Dollywood. Not for the cameras, not for the publicity, but because despite everything he had put her through, Porter Wagoner had been part of her story. Dolly Parton never forgets where she came from, and she never forgets the people who helped her get there, even when they break her heart. We've counted down from 5 to 1, from criticism to betrayal, And through it all, one thing has remained constant: Dolly Parton's refusal to let anyone break her spirit. Jeff Tweedy dismissed her songwriting as superficial, suggesting she should have stopped after Jolene. And Dolly didn't fire back or defend herself publicly. She simply kept writing songs that touch millions of people around the world, letting her work answer the criticism better than words ever could. Elvis Presley wanted to record "I Will Always Love You," and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, demanded half of her publishing rights in exchange. Dolly walked away from an opportunity most artists would have given anything for, because she knew her worth and refused to let anyone take what she had created. That decision cost her a friendship with the king of rock and roll, but it earned her millions when Whitney Houston turned that same song into one of the best-selling singles in music history nearly 20 years later. Linda Ronstadt called her flaky and unreliable, said she had no intention of working with her again, and publicly criticized her commitment to their trio project. Dolly took the hit, absorbed the hurtful words, and years later found a way to make peace, even if the warmth between them never fully returned. Howard Stern humiliated her on national radio with a fake interview that made her sound vulgar, racist, and cruel, using her own voice edited against her. Dolly released the angriest public statement of her entire career and threatened legal action, something she almost never does. 15 years later, she walked into his studio with her head held high to promote her rock album, proving that she could face the people who hurt her without losing her dignity. And then there was Porter Wagoner, the man who gave her a platform and then tried to own her, who helped launch her dreams, and then sued her for $3 million when she wanted to stand on her own. Dolly settled the case, walked away, and spent years barely speaking to him. But when it came time to induct him into the Country Music Hall of Fame, she stood on that stage and told the world how much he had meant to her. When he was dying of lung cancer, she sat by his bedside and said goodbye. And when he passed away, she held a tribute concert at Dollywood. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but because he had been part of her story, and Dolly Parton never forgets where she came from. That's what makes her different from so many other celebrities who hold grudges, who let bitterness poison their legacy, who spend their careers settling scores. Dolly doesn't pretend the wounds don't exist. She acknowledges them, she talks about them honestly, and then she chooses forgiveness anyway, not because the people who hurt her deserve it, but because she refuses to carry that weight.